Which I don't know. I've never heard a video game be that forward with the cursing before.
That's because you never played Gears of War, man.
Okay.
Gears of War is a man's game, Jeff. Come on.
Oh, man's game. I feel like there's a lot to unpack there, Austin, but we're not the podcast for that.
And welcome back to another episode of the Games Gone By podcast. It is Sunday, March 16th at the time of this recording. I'm your host, Adam, and I am slightly above indifferent in regards to my desire to discuss Gears of War. Boys?
Yeah, so I'm Austin, and I like Gears of War, so I'm excited for this. I've played all of these games, so I'm excited to talk about it.
I'm Jeff, and I'm so excited that this game was short.
It is a pretty short game. What was it, like not even an 8-hour playtime through the campaign, I think?
Yeah, that's about what I think we ended at. I don't know. The Xbox app refused to tell me what my playtime was, so I don't remember.
Yeah, it seemed like about 8 hours. Like I did it in 2 sessions. I beat almost the whole game in the first session, like literally from nothing to the middle of Act 4, and then spent like an hour finishing up Act 4 and 5.
It's one of these things, too, where I thought we were going to have a lot more to talk about because we went into this thinking about horde mode, which turns out doesn't exist in the first Gears of War. We went in thinking about 4-player co-op, which turns out doesn't exist in the first Gears of War. So this has turned out to really just be a podcast about it was almost just like a single-player 8-hour Call of Duty campaign. But it's okay because I think there is some cool things to talk about, and we had a pretty decent time. Austin, I know you had played like all of these games before this. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've played, I think, all of them except for Judgment Day, which was like the Baird-focused spin-off that predates the first game, I think. It's like Baird's story leading up to the first game, I think. I never played it, so I don't know for sure.
That sounds like something Jeff would love.
Yeah, does the prequel explain why he's such a bitch?
I like a lot of these games. I've played all of them at least once, some of them twice. I mean, this one I think I've probably now played like 3 times. So I like Gears. I like the cover-based shooter. I like the kind of military banter that these characters have. I'm excited to talk about this.
That's funny to hear, Austin, because like when we did the Halo episode, I feel like it was the exact opposite. I have played Halo so many times, particularly the first one. And Gears of War, I had never touched before. This is the first time I've played a Gears of War game. It got popular enough that I knew what it was. I mean, you know, the Gear Wars, man. Everyone's heard of the Gear Wars. But I had never played a game like this before. So it was fun to go back to 2006 for a little while and live not the birth of the cover shooter genre, but certainly like the liftoff, right? Like the rocket launch. Yeah, and it's cool that we're talking about it.
I was definitely somewhere in between the two of you. I thought I hadn't played this, but then when we were going through the mines, I got really intense deja vu in the minecart part. So I think I had played the first couple acts like at a friend's house when this game came out, but I definitely never finished it, and I've never played any of the other ones. I was more or less going into this fresh too. Austin, would you say that like when we played Pokemon, you were like, dude, all of these games are exactly the same, right? Do you feel like Gears has done a good job kind of changing itself over time, or did the latest one also kind of just feel like one with a few more things?
No, I mean, I think you're probably right that this is it's a lot like the Pokemon scenario. These games are all very similar in that their core mechanics are cover-based shooting, and it's just different set pieces wrapped around that cover-based shooting. Like they rarely ever do anything dramatically different. I do think the newer ones feel smoother and like a lot, like the cover going in and out of it is a little smoother, and just rolling around. They give you like more dynamic areas and different types of cover than this one, where everywhere here it's like, you know, waist high wall.
Yeah.
Right. Like here's your cover. I think the other games give you a little bit more variety. They kind of mix up the guns and stuff. Like they do add stuff, but at the core, it's really just, this is a cover-based shooter all the way through all 5 games.
I mean, I was very impressed with the number of different things you could go into cover behind, like even objects that were different shapes. In that final battle there on the train, there's like this circular thing that has like a window through the center. And some enemy definitely managed to nail me with an arrow like right through that gap. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. That's different. It wasn't exclusively knee-high walls. So for this being
that is true.
for this being what is like the first entry in the franchise, I was actually decently impressed with the variety of cover and the different set pieces.
And it's going to be difficult to talk about this game without comparing it to some of the other stuff around the time that were cover shooters, which like the first thing that came to mind for us was the first Mass Effect game, right? Which came out about a full year after this. Austin, you were telling me, we were talking about this, you're like, no, dude, that game's cover sucked. Trust me. And I was like, no, I don't think it was that bad. So I had to boot it back up. And so I booted up the original 2007 PC version. And like, I remember thinking there was a cover button. There's no cover button. You bump up against things and then you kind of take cover, provided that it is like a cover object that you can actually take cover against, which sometimes it seems like it should be and it's not. And then the other thing I thought was weird is there's a dedicated crouch button, right? Which Gears of War doesn't have. And it kind of does what it would in any other shooter. It increases your accuracy, yada, yada. But you can go up and down and cover, like crouch when you're in cover, including the waist high cover. And your character literally just stands up to get shot in the back of the head. and I don't know how I didn't remember this from Mass Effect. But all of that to say that I was actually kind of impressed with how fluid some of the cover mechanics were in Gears of War. Even if a lot of the rest of the game felt like a little dated here and there, that part still felt like pretty good to engage with.
I would agree with that. I think Gears, to me, has still kind of been the defining cover shooter. And these mechanics kind of went away after probably Mass Effect 3 was the last game I can remember having the like very dedicated like press button to get into cover and pop out and like move cover, like the Gears system. I feel like Mass Effect 3 is like the last game I know that did that. But I still think other than obviously the newer Gears like Gears 4 and 5
right,
still do that exact thing. But I still think Gears is the best of that. Like I think they've always nailed the feeling of it. There's like a weight behind getting into cover. Like you can kind of feel the character slide into cover and duck. And then when they pop out, it's like it just feels very fluid. Even in this first game, and I know we did play the Ultimate Edition, so it is a more perfected version, I guess. But I do think a lot of that is just graphical. Like I remember the first Gears feeling a lot like this.
There's apparently some extra missions in this Ultimate version, but I couldn't tell you what they would be because I never played the not Ultimate version.
It's been too long since I've played the original to recall which ones are not in this, but...
Wait. Are we saying parts of the main campaign that we just played through were not in the original game?
I think that's what I was reading, that there's like 2 or 3 extra missions in Act 4 or 5. Like, I think it was stuff that was originally kind of cut and they didn't want it to be sort of deal. But I'd have to double check on that.
Yeah, we'll have to go back and look at that. That'd be interesting to know which was like more content, which is funny because the campaign is so incredibly short already. But on the other hand, I did feel like Acts 4 and 5 were like disjointed narratively. I mean, I struggle to say that this game has a story, but we can get to that in a second. I will defend Mass Effect's cover system, which is objectively worse than what Gears does, but I think it's fine. And what Mass Effect has going for it is that there's just so much more to it. Whereas with Gears, the game is 100% a cover shooter system. And man, for that being a core mechanic, I was expecting a lot more from the weapons or maybe some of the set pieces. It was a struggle to stay entertained even when the campaign was only like 8 hours.
That might be a good place to start. I was mentioning earlier, we were thinking about like the horde mode and all of these iconic Gear things. And some of the iconic things in Gears of War, the 3 things I think of would be the active reload, the horde mode, and the Lancer chainsaw. One of those didn't exist yet, and the other 2 kind of suck. Like I did not care for the active reload simply because it never felt as good hitting it as it felt awful missing it. And there were certain guns like the sniper rifle where if you ever didn't get the extra damage, it just didn't do any damage. So I think it's an interesting idea. Are they still doing this in like Gears of War 5, Austin?
Yeah. Active reload is still very much a key part of the Gears franchise. I honestly kind of like it. I understand where you're coming from. I do think it feels bad to miss it, but there is something I think weirdly engaging about trying to time your reload right. It just adds like another little element in the heat of battle. Like, we have to reload. Let's time it real quick. I don't know. There's something that feels like fun about that to me. But I definitely get where you're coming from.
I agree with that, but it's just so funny to me that they, even I guess by Gears 5, they haven't figured out that like I don't know. It would be objectively more fun if they didn't punish you for missing it, right? Like, I just think the base reload time should be a lot worse, to the point where, like, you should never do it, right? Like, it would be terrible if you didn't play the little mini game, and it should just be like, the nailing it in the little white, and then getting it slightly worse, and then like not doing it all, which is just always bad, as opposed to like, I don't know. I really felt it when those characters were like, "Oh fuck, I fucked my reload." Yeah. I was saying the same thing. So
you're like, "Damn it, me too." Yeah. like now I'm screwed. Yeah. Well, and to be fair, I don't know if they've kind of shortened that or like kind of tweaked the base reload time to where it doesn't feel as painful. Like, I can't remember in the most recent games if they've kind of shortened that or if it's like actively punishing you still. But definitely the act of doing the active reload is still a very like integral part of this series.
Yeah, there's like 4 outcomes when you try and reload, right? Like, critical success, like the minor success, or fucking it up, or you could ignore it completely. And because you can fuck it up, I found myself ignoring it as often as I was trying to get like that critical success to get extra damage.
Oh, no, I hit it every time, or I try and hit it every time. I'm not saying I'm that good that I do hit it every time, but I try and hit it every time.
The impetus to me switching from the sniper rifle, like every single time that I did, was because I would screw up the reload and you just sit there for like 12 seconds as they reload the sniper rifle.
It was a really long time.
I'm going to get another gun.
I do want to say the Lancer chainsaw is the best thing in this game. Cutting an enemy in half, so good.
So this might be my hottest take here. That's the worst of the 3 iconic Gears things.
No, what? How is reloading more fun?
It's not
absolutely
that it
insane.
Doesn't look cool, because it definitely does. It's that like the chainsaw got me killed so many times because it's so much worse than just hitting things with the back of your pistol, like in every conceivable way, in every scenario, no matter what. Particularly the wretches. Good God,
it's not nearly as cool though.
Right. And here's the thing, Adam, like objectively it is a worse tactic, right? But you're so fucking bored otherwise. Like, what are you going what are you going to do?
I don't know, man. I really enjoyed going like close quarters combat with these guys because that was so much better than any of the guns in this damn game.
I will say with the wretches, you definitely, for context, for people who don't know what the wretches are, like they're little small, they look like almost like Gollum from Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
They're like running around, scurrying on the ground, jumping on you, like clawing at your face. They're terrible. But if you just punch them one time with a gun, it will instantly kill them. Like even in hardcore.
And I'm definitely exaggerating a little bit, but it really is the wretches that made me say that, because there was a point where I think it may have been Act 3, but you're fighting all of these wretches over and over. And there's times where one shotgun blast is not killing them because I'm either like doing it when they're a little too far away or I'm not putting it perfectly over the center of them. And it was just so much easier to punch them. And it was a one-hit kill. And this was on hardcore, right? This was on the hard mode. So I was kind of blown away that no one looked at that and thought that was a problem. But it was for me.
Well, hold on here. I'm a little confused. I feel like I never missed wretches with the shotgun. It was so much. Sorry, fun isn't the right word. It wasn't that good of a time. But I enjoyed when the wretches.
You can like this game, Jeff. You don't have to caveat every time on how much you don't like it.
I had a good time in the wretch shooting gallery scenarios when they would stream in like one at a time, and I would just get to like pump the shotgun and fire and pump the shotgun and fire. But after you do that 6 times in a row, it is a little boring, and you want to move on.
I have a clip where I took out 2 with the same punch, and it was easily the coolest thing I did.
I'm sorry, you killed 2 things with one punch? What?
Well, wretches, to be clear, not like big soldiers, but yes, one swing of the shotgun butt killed 2 wretches, and it was great.
The melee, the base melee for like shotgun and sniper is crazy effective, and I think it's because they wanted like, okay, the Lancer's a one-hit kill, so it's probably only fair if we make the other guns one-hit kills too, so that you have like a encouragement to swap weapons, but it's like, those are so much easier to melee with, so it makes them feel broken in comparison.
That's wild. All right, so before we get too freewheeling, I would really like to know the loadouts you guys ran with for most of the game. So, Austin, what did you find yourself favoring weapons-wise?
So, I to kind of lead into that, I think one of my biggest problems with Gears, going back to it, and it's still a problem to this day, is that I don't think D-pad weapon swap is super like fun or dynamic in a game like this, because it just makes me want to stick with one weapon because I can't switch as easily. I feel like it's switching with Y. So I ran with the Lancer like 90% of the time, and then would switch off to either shotgun or sniper whenever it was viable. Like if there was a section where they gave me a sniper rifle, I was probably like, okay, I'm going to need this. So I grabbed it and used it for a little while, but then switched back to shotgun as soon as I could. But I mostly ran Lancer like all the time.
I definitely ran shotgun 99% of this game, and then the other weapon slot was just, I don't know, when I ran out of ammo with it, I might replace it with something else. But I was mostly just, I thought the snub pistol was my second favorite weapon.
I never used, I think I used the pistol like twice in this
the
entire
headshots with that were actually pretty damaging, and it's just also the problem too where these guys don't really react to your bullet fire a lot.
They do not
until you do a certain threshold of damage. So the Lancer just felt like such a pea shooter where you're just emptying an entire round into something or magazine that continues to come charging at you, and I just like I couldn't stand that, so I pretty much dumped the Lancer the second anything else came on the screen.
I don't think I was smart enough to pick up on the fact that it's like damage thresholds that makes the enemies behave differently, but that does explain a lot because I had the same problem with the Lancer. I started out mostly using the Lancer, and then to Adam's point, I felt like I wasn't doing anything. This man's just going to charge through my hail of bullets, so why do I care? But I couldn't get into the sniper rifle or the torque bow either, particularly the sniper rifle, because like if you miss your shot or you miss the reload or they're wearing a fucking helmet, it's it's just difficult to kill anything with it. So I eventually went back to the Lancer shotgun combo, and I completely agree that the shotgun is like by far the best weapon in the game, and blind firing with the shotgun, incredible. Just so good.
I didn't do a lot of the blind fire. Austin, did you? I can't recall us playing with that very often.
Every now and then, but I was not a big blind fire guy. The shotgun I probably did blind fire the most with, because especially for like the wretches and stuff, it feels pretty good to just blind fire them. But for the most part, no. But I also didn't run the shotgun nearly as much as you guys did. So
it's just there are so many parts of this game that are kind of hallways, right? And enemies funnel down a hallway. And in these close quarters hallway segments, you blind fire the shotgun. It means you take no damage, and because it's a shotgun and they're charging at you, it annihilates them. It made some of the parts in the house and on the train at the end of the game an absolute cakewalk.
The Hammer of Dawn was obviously a lot of fun. So what is that? It's like a satellite targeting heat laser. And anytime they gave me that, I would pick it up because it was so much fun to kill little guys with that. I guess, of course, killing the Cedars and the Berserkers, like you have to kill with the Hammer of Dawn. But it was so much fun to just vaporize guys behind cover with that. I wish there were more areas that you got to use it, because I didn't really think it was like overpowered. I mean, there was a cooldown. It wasn't the easiest thing to aim. If they run away, you won't catch them with it. So I kind of wish that was sprinkled more throughout, but I understand that it's Gears of War. These enemies come from underground. You can't be in range of satellite laser all of the time. It's fine.
It's very much a set piece designed weapon, intentionally for better or worse. But it's definitely like, there's a Hammer of Dawn. You have to pick it up because you're going to have to kill an enemy with it. And after you kill that enemy, you probably will not have a use for it anymore. Like, you might be able to get one or two little people kills, but for the most part, you will not be using it.
It is definitely the second coolest weapon in the game, but it did feel a little anticlimactic. Probably great for 2006. I will never forget the one point where I was like trying to kill probably a boomer who had just like busted out of a building, but he kind of got stuck and was still kind of in the building. And the laser refuses to fire at anything that's like inside, right?
Right.
I don't know why. It's just a building. You can also vaporize that from orbit.
But there's a roof. It can't find the target.
Right. Who fucking knows where he is? Like,
come on.
Sure,
there's a roof in the way, Jeff. Come on.
I'm staring at him, communicating his signal right now, but sure, I can't find him. So maybe this is a good excuse then to dive a little bit into just some of the acts and story beats, because ultimately what that is just an excuse for you to fight in different environments, in different arenas. That's kind of like the most that the plot in this game accomplishes, I think. It's just keeping you moving to new locations. And in that way, it's pretty effective. We actually ended up playing the first act on normal because we were just kind of feeling it out. And then, of course, after that, it was like, oh my God, this is way too easy. So,
it was so simple.
So I don't know if I would have thought Act 1 was maybe a little more frustrating if it had been on hard, but I really enjoyed Act 1 because it was just like, we kind of went through it. We got to kill the Berserker at the end, right? Because so what is it? Like, Marcus is in jail because he disobeyed some order years ago before the game starts. So Dom shows up and is like, hey man, I'm breaking you out because your talents are wasted here. And then you meet up with Lieutenant Kim and Private Carmine and you push through. This is the ruins of Sarah, right? This is like the Earth of this universe.
As far as I know, there is a single planet that humanity is on, and it is this one.
Okay.
As far as like the Gears 1 game campaign tells you, it's like, this is our planet, this is our home, and this is what we're fighting for.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah. I think that's true. It's just I called Earth for some reason.
And Act 1 is basically just you're breaking Marcus out of jail, and then you fight toward like the former, what is essentially like the former seat of the COG government, right? The House of Sovereigns. It has been, it's in ruins because it seems like for the most part, the COG has gotten its ass kicked all over the planet in this war. That's sort of the impression you get at the start of this game. We get this brutal scene where, what's his name? Lieutenant Kim is like ambushed by General RAAM of the local forces. And so the first act ends in kind of your very typical like, oh man, they've killed that guy that was with us from the start. So now we can get the real party members that are going to be with us for the rest of the game.
Act 1 is such a classic exercise in like, hey, here are all these red shirts that have 3 voice lines. They're going to die in interesting or comical ways so that you can meet the real characters of this game, like the Coal Train.
The Coal Train. I am disappointed, Adam, that you blew past my favorite best boy, Private Carmine, who is completely obliterated.
Oh, is this
his very first appearance?
This is where he dies too. That's right.
Yeah, the second that man opened his mouth on the helicopter, I was like, that guy is dying. Like, I thought he was going to get shot out of the helicopter, much less live for like 3 whole battles.
So for those of you who don't know, the Carmine bit is like a running joke throughout the series. They're like a family. So there's like a bunch of Carmine brothers, and they all just get obliterated in every game.
Oh, what
so, like,
the
every game has a new Private Carmine, and they all just could get completely destroyed. Every game.
That is legitimately funny, but it reminds me that this game is both like kind of serious and also kind of very not serious in tone.
I don't think it's as serious as I think it's very B-movie cheesy. Like I think it's meant to be like that fake machismo serious. But like no, I don't think there's many people who take Gears as like some sort of high art. Like
oh no.
But to Jeff's point, like in Act 2 even, you know, they're going through territory that is held by a group known as the Stranded, and they literally got their name because like during some huge operation by the COG government, a lot of people were left like to fend for themselves as their cities were vaporized to prevent like the Locust from taking them over, but they didn't get to I forget the big name of the Sarah capital where the COG sits, but they didn't make it there in time. So quite literally, like millions of people were stranded, and as a result, they don't have a very high opinion of the COG. So in Act 2, you actually get a little bit of this world building, and that's kind of it's just like a little bit of depth there, and it's kind of dark because especially if you read about this at all, you'll find out that like there's a good reason they don't like the COG, right? I mean, it's this giant fascist world government that like obliterates their hometowns because they don't want the aliens to get their resources. But then, like you guys are saying, the game doesn't always like have a tone that makes it seem like you should have even brought that up, because you don't really seem prepared to handle it in any real way. I don't know. It is kind of a strange back and forth in the tone.
No, and like none of that backstory is actually in Gears 1.
Right.
It's just there are the Stranded. These are the only civilians you see, and the super soldiers fucking hate them for no reason. And it's like, oh, I don't understand why we're like fighting an alien invasion, and also fuck these poor people, man. Who the fuck do you think you are? Like,
it is not explained well.
Yeah.
I do think if you do, like, because this is what I always do with these games, right? Is I had so many questions. Like, let me go read the wiki. The Stranded spend a lot of Gears of War 2 and 3 being pussies that won't fight the aliens that are slowly killing them, and I think that's why the COG don't like them. But yeah, like you said, in this first game, it is not clear at all. They're just like, look at these people without guns and armor, losers.
How dare they? Yeah, and I totally get where you're coming from, and I think the later games do flesh some of this like world building and some of this lore out a little bit, and kind of finds the tone a little better. But I do think it's nice to have the little funny bits in there too. Like I don't think the game ever takes itself too seriously, but it does. I don't think it wants to make a statement per se, but it does have some lore and depth to it.
Not in the first one though. Like this is very much a game where someone was trying to build a cover shooter and they did a good job at that, and they put all that together, and the plot, like Adam said earlier, is just there to kind of connect the bits. Plot is a strong word.
Oh,
they are couplings
100%.
and nothing more.
100%. In this first game, it's very much just a vehicle for you to shoot things.
And speaking of vehicles, that is really the most interesting part of Act 2. And it might be, is this the only part in the game where you end up in a vehicle? I can't remember. But you have to go through, the stranded territory is like in the darkness, and there's these little bat creatures called the krill that will just annihilate anything caught in the darkness, right? So you have to go through stranded territory, like blowing up propane tanks, which are apparently how they fuel everything in that society. So it's kind of funny that you're trying to help them by eradicating their fuel supply, apparently. And that creates light. That's how you navigate through the level. And then you eventually get in this giant tank thing with what has, like, instead of a turret, it's a giant spotlight. And it is otherwise kind of your classic vehicle turret set piece segment, but just you're shooting a giant spotlight at like bat creatures instead of, mowing down traditional enemies. And that is most of Act 2 is like blowing up propane tanks, getting to the tank, shining a light on bats. And then you're, at some mines suddenly. The game, I don't know if I just wasn't paying attention or if they just kind of like it fades to black after an act and then tons of shit happens and now you're there.
You like find yourself in a new zone, like, oh, I guess we're here.
Again, the maps were built first, and then they were like, oh, this is this one's going to be in day and this one's at night and blah, blah, blah.
How do we piece this together? I actually really did like the Nightfall concept, though. The, like, you can't go in the darkness. You have to keep finding, like, ways to generate light so the krill don't eat you alive. I thought that was a cool, not so much a set piece, but just giving you something different. And instead of, oh, here's more enemies to mow down, it's like, let's figure out how to navigate this world and, find sources of light to not get destroyed.
Yeah, it adds a literal another dimension onto the cover shooter, right? Because up until now, it's just been you're in cover or you're out of cover. And now you have to pay attention to like the actual lighting, which again in 2006 was probably super cool with cutting edge graphics and stuff. But playing it 20 years later, it's not quite as much fun. So it was easy to get kind of bored in this segment.
Yeah, and if I was reading all these old reviews from when the game came out, and that's pretty much what everyone says, right? Is it looks so good. It looks so good. So I do have to imagine back then it really truly was like cutting edge.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, I honestly thought the Ultimate Edition still looked pretty good to this. Like, I thought...
Oh, yeah, sure.
It still looked pretty solid.
I guess it's worth mentioning that all these first two acts are taking place in the context of, like, you're trying to find this technology that will allow you to map the underground caverns of the Locust, right? And I get kind of lost in this because I feel like you do it 3 times and it never works, including the final time at the very end. And I guess it's like the first time I thought it was a bomb, but it was just a mapping thing. And then the second time it's a bomb. It's actually kind of confusing because it just doesn't matter. You're just going to end up in a different location fighting the same types of enemies. I mean, they do introduce like new enemy types as these kind of games do, but it's just like the Locust were here. We tried to destroy them. It didn't work. Now we're here and the Locust are here and we tried to destroy. And it's just 5 acts of that, which is not, like we've been saying, this game is what it is. That isn't necessarily a problem because it's so good at what it does do well, but it's just, I don't know if they thought I was going to connect to any of these story beats or characters, but other than the fact that I really empathized with Dom shaking his head Picard style every time Cole opened his mouth or Bear did something stupid, it was hard to relate, I would say.
I definitely agree that none of the story is particularly like relatable or engaging or going to give you any emotions that are beyond like a slight chuckle here and there. But I did like the banter between the characters. I thought the 4 main dudes had like some good quips and some good banter, and I think that stuff is fleshed out later on in the series. Like those characters get to bond more and they form a deeper bond. So I'm kind of using some of my knowledge of what happens later to retroactively look back on the first game. So it's a little unfair compared to where you guys are coming from. But I did like a lot of their interactions between each other.
Are the Locust bugs? What are they?
They almost seem like a Covenant type thing, where they're a collection of different stuff. I'm not sure.
They just come out of the ground. They're like mole creatures.
They're
but
like
not really.
That's funny. They're because they just look like orcs, right? Playing this game between its sort of like shallow storytelling in this first installment here, and seeing the protagonists being like freaking roided out space marines, right? And then orcs started crawling out of the ground. I was like, am I playing a knockoff Warhammer 40K? It's also a little bit of like an absurdist vibe where the, space marines are walking around telling the poor people that, get the fuck out of the way, like, go die for the emperor slave type thing. And then orcs started popping out of the ground, and I'm like, what universe am I in?
They do look a lot like the kind of higher ranked orcs in like the Lord of the Rings movies.
Mm-hmm. Especially the archers later with the armor. So it's like, all right, I'm fighting space orcs. There are sort of some Tyranid in the background. There's not that many dinosaurs. So it's like if you replaced the Space Marine aesthetic with like the modern American military, you would kind of understand what this game looks like.
To Austin's point, like, while there isn't necessarily a whole lot of dialogue that's like to write home about or anything, I found a lot of their banter refreshing in a weird way. I think it's just because we spent the last 15 years having every game like this have a central character who's like a 42-year-old with some kind of past trauma they're suppressing, and they have to like go through some extended depression allegory to get to like reunite with their childhood or something. And this is just military bros blowing shit up, and they don't make any pretense of it being anything else. And part of me was like, there's something almost like fun about the fact that this is the most surface level characterization and storytelling they could do.
It feels very Fast and Furious to me, kind of, where it's just like, this is a thing about racing cars and big explosions in the later Fast and Furious movies. So like, that's what Gears is. It's like, this is a thing about blowing stuff up and killing aliens, and you're going to do it in the most generic, like roided out military bro kind of way. And there's just something that's kind of like popcorn movie appealing about that to me.
Yeah, and I think it was a good choice for them. I don't know if someone lied to me at some point, but I thought a bit of the zeitgeist around Gears of War is that it had an interesting, like, engaging story. Then I played the first one and I was like, what? I can't. I can barely understand like what the mission objective is moment to moment. There wasn't much of a story there.
Keep walking down the hallway shooting at things. That's your mission objective.
I think Gears might have a slightly engaging lore behind it, but it's stuff you don't really see until you kind of progress deeper in, because you learn more about like the Locust Queen and how they were created and all this stuff that I don't even really remember all that well myself, but they do dig further into like the Stranded and the Cog and the Locust and like how all these things come together and how all this started, and you get kind of a deeper lore to it. But I don't think they really had all that ready for the first game. I think they were just like, we want to make a really strong, competent cover shooter, and if it does well, we'll flesh out the world and the story as we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's kind of how it feels.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is, and it makes a lot of sense, both as like a game development strategy and just like a publishing strategy, right? How to make money in the games industry, like that is the right way to do
right.
it. I just had such an impression of like, oh, Gears is going to have a story that might compete with Halo, and it does not. Halo 1 had so much more personality in my mind than this game did.
So we mentioned the Locust being underground, right? And in Act 3 is where we first find ourselves underground fighting them. And I didn't notice this on the first time through, but I'm reading story summaries, and apparently there's a couple lines of dialogue where they talk about like, this is the first time they realize that the Locust have been using some of the captured humans as slaves. And I thought it was just kind of funny because it's like, what, am I supposed to hate them more now? Like the entire eradication of my species was one thing, but slavery is a line I can't cross. Like, so I'm not quite sure. I think there's other creatures too that they're using as slaves. So that's why I thought they might be like a Covenant thing, but I couldn't find out much more about that. Austin, I don't know if you know anything about that.
Do not.
I think you're just supposed to hate the Stranded more for letting themselves be enslaved. Like, oh, you fucking pussies. So
you're really locked on this Stranded bit.
I will say I read more of the wiki and I hate the Stranded, but it's not obvious in this game why. But like, because they just really don't do much with it here. But I think it's probably not that surprising, right? You have a game coming out, it's an 8-hour shooter, and you may never get to make another one again. You're not going to overload on the narrative, right?
No.
Turns out they were going to make 8 more of them, but they didn't know that.
Yes, yeah.
But so the underground mining facility I thought was pretty fun through the most part, but there was definitely like, I have written here on a piece of paper on my desk that just says like Act 3 was my least favorite act. And I'm thinking it was part of those minecart parts because skill issue for sure. But Austin, you remember how bad I struggled going down the right side?
We died like 7 times doing the minecart.
And then we swapped sides and I somehow beat the other one, even though they're almost identical. I don't know what was happening. But I think I stopped using the shotgun on things on the ceiling is what I finally...
Good strategy.
Act 3 to me had probably the coolest set piece moment in the game, which is not saying much because I remembered the thing that I remembered Gears having more of was like kind of big bombastic set piece moments, and they really didn't have a lot of that in this game as much as I remembered. I think that's maybe because it's in the later games they have those sequences. But you do have like the big corpser fight at the end of Act 3, and I did really like that fight once we kind of figured out how to do it. At first, we struggled a little bit. But...
Is it the thing you push into the lava?
Yeah, into the emulsion.
So it turns out it has like a death aura, and if you just stand in the wrong place, it doesn't have to do anything. You'll just die. And I had the shotgun, and I kept trying to get close to like when it opened up its arms, like shoot it in the stomach or something. But you'll just die.
You can't do that. You can't get that close to it. You have to stay a little further back.
One of the few times where I thought the shotgun was the wrong choice,
But I kind of liked that fight. I thought that was a cool, like, again, just something a little bit different than hide under cover, because there really was not a lot of cover to use there. You just kind of had to dodge things and keep shooting its stomach until it fell into the lava.
Yeah, which
or emulsion
really confused me. I mean, I like the cinematic at the end and the fact that you're like pushing it back onto a cliff, and then I immediately picked up on the fact that you need to like wrench out the screws or whatever so it falls into the lava.
Yeah.
Sorry, the emulsion, not lava.
The emulsion. Come on, Jeff.
Let's be clear here.
Yeah.
But to your point, there's no cover. You just stand there and shoot at it. So it's really jarring. You're like, wait, what have I just been doing for 20 minutes? And now I don't do that. And I tickle it with my pea shooter. And then eventually I'm going to win this fight. Like I found the fight mostly confusing.
I mean, it just mixes up. It just mixes up the playstyle, right? You still have to dodge things. Like it still shoots stuff at you. You just have to dodge it instead of hide under cover. I kind of thought that was an interesting approach instead of just another sequence of let's hide under cover.
I mean, props to them for trying different things, but I didn't think that one worked very well.
Is this the first act where you fight the lambent enemies?
Yeah, I think so. You might see them in Nightfall, like at the tail end of Nightfall. I can't remember for sure.
What's a lambent?
So those were like the lambent wretches were the ones that blew up. I can't remember what the other lambent variants were, but they're basically locusts that got too close to the emulsion and have like mutated as a result.
I think they're just stronger. I think the other ones are just like mostly stronger. The wretches blow up, and I think the other ones are just like more powerful.
And the lambent wretches, I really thought was going to be the moment I have to stop meleeing things, but no, just punch them and dodge roll away, and it's still the best way to take them out. So
yeah. They tried.
But I guess the end of Act 3 ends with us activating not the light mass bomb, which is a whole different thing, but the resonator that was mapping out the tunnels so that we could later do the light mass bomb. But of course, it's the tunnels are literally just bigger than we thought, so the mission failed. And I'm like, okay, that seems like something you might have prepared for going in. So now suddenly in Act 4, you find out that like, oh, Marcus's dad used to be like this big deal, and he has a huge estate. The Phoenix family has a huge estate. And one of those nerds mapped out all of the tunnels. And now we got to go get the device from his house. It's not really any worse than anything else in this game, but that made no sense to me. Like some amateur has the best map of the Locust compared to like the government military.
That is definitely the weirdest part of the game. I do think Marcus's dad was like a scientist for the military or something that you find out later, if I remember correctly.
He just took his work home and didn't give it back.
And pretty much, like, he was a part of the military. Like, he was or at least part of this government. Like, he was a big deal and not just like some random guy who was mapping stuff out. Like, he was like a scientist for the government. Yeah, this whole section's a little strange. I did like the combat encounters in the Phoenix Mansion for the most part. Like, I thought navigating that and fighting stuff in there was pretty cool. But story-wise, this part is just like a big dud. I mean, a lot of the game story is a big dud, but this part particularly didn't do much for me.
Was Act 4 the part where we were in... So there's like, one of you is in this little like bombed-out hotel apartment-looking thing, and the other one's in the street. And the person up top has to go find the Hammer of Dawn to kill like a corpser while the person in the street survives. And we had to try that like 30 times. You remember that?
That is Act 4 after you get out of the mansion.
Right, yes.
That is almost just a summary of Act 4. In fact, I was, I'm looking at all of these summaries of the acts, trying to remind myself. And all the ones for Act 4 are basically just like the gears hold out in a defensive location until reinforcements arrive, like 3 times. 4 is just nothing but combat, basically.
It's a whole lot of nothing.
So that's something we haven't called out yet, is that there are specific parts of this game and where they split you and your other co-op player. And you both still kind of cooperate, but are technically like off on your own. So we should talk about those for a minute. And we should start this off letting folks know that y'all played it together as a co-op campaign. And I also played it as a co-op campaign with another friend of mine, Taz. Thanks, Taz. So what did you guys think of the split sections where they like force you to choose a side and kind of cooperate together?
I thought, so there were multiple times. So I guess Austin was hosting and you don't see the text that it's showing you as the second player. So I'm just like, the game's frozen or what's the deal here? It's just like stuck at a still image. And Austin's like, what do you want to do? And I'm like, what do you mean? What do I want to do? Like, do we have to restart?
Well, I think the best part of that too is like, it's always like, do you want the right path or the left path? And it's like, does it matter? Like,
I will say there were
what path is what?
There were certain sections of those I really enjoyed. There's a couple where there's like a turret. The other person has to flank because it's really hard to hit the turret from head on. So you have to force it to turn. And I like that. But then I feel like there were other times where they just split you up just so you could complain about Baird and Cole being on your side instead of your actual human friend.
And it doesn't help that Baird and Cole cannot revive you. Just one of the stupidest decisions that this game could have made. I don't know why.
They will stand over your dead body and stare at you, but then they just don't do anything about it.
But they won't do anything. But they'll still die, and you'll still have to revive them. but they will not revive you.
So to answer your question, Jeff, I think I did enjoy them overall, but there were definitely some where I felt like it wasn't as it was kind of pointless.
Yeah, I like the idea of them, and then they made me very mad, right? Because you can't revive your friend, so if either one of you dies at all during the sequence, you have to start the whole fucking thing over, which most of the time was not that big of a deal, but there's one of these sections, I think in Act 4, where you're fighting in a theater, right? Like there's a stage. And there's the balconies, and then there's the orchestra and like the audience downstairs. And we had to do that segment like 10 times to the point that is the only segment where we traded. We used to just like pick a side and then like maybe repeat it a couple times.
Interesting.
We did it 10 times, and I was like, all right, let's swap.
we also had to do that one a few times, I think, like 4 or 5. I liked it. But I took, so which side did you end up taking first? Because I took the like balcony section.
I did the balconies first, which was the most fun I had with a sniper rifle. And then we swapped and eventually beat it while I was downstairs fighting off the hordes.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering if you didn't like it because you were on the balcony and didn't like the sniper rifle.
That was definitely...
I was also on the balcony.
Yeah, that was definitely the more boring role of those two. Like, it actually felt very lopsided. Because if you were up top, it felt like you were very much like the supporting character, while the dude on the bottom had to live and then also do a lot of the work. But could have just been us playing.
From the balcony, I was able to like take down the stage and like drop it on the corpser and everything. So like I feel like you do get a little bit of action on the top. I liked being on the balcony there.
I would have liked it more if there was just like a checkpoint in the middle of it. Like this was by far the longest one of the split sections, and there were just a few too many waves of enemies for the fact that if either one of you goes down, it is game over.
I could agree with that. I definitely know where you're coming from there.
This kind of reminds me, like, this game has a very tiny amount of times you can do it, but there's like environmental kills you can do. Remember also, it was like in the first or second mission, we like knocked over a wall with a barrel and it like landed on them.
Yeah, and it like crushed a hole. Like there was like some that were just popping out a hole, and we blew up. Yeah, like a sign or like the wall fell on them. Yeah.
And I was like, that was pretty cool, but I barely noticed any more of them throughout the game. Like you definitely have some explosive barrels here and there, but I didn't notice them really doing much other than just blowing up.
Yeah, it's definitely not used as much as I think it is in the later games. I think that idea is fleshed out a little bit more in like 2 and 3.
It is ultimately just like a demo reel for the series, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of what a first game is in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. The biggest fake out was in the final fight. So I'll jump ahead a little bit here. But on the final fight, there's this big red fuel tank on the train. And I'm like, oh, obviously I should shoot. No, doesn't blow up at all. Not relevant.
Oh, no, you can throw a grenade at it.
You can?
I'm about to say, you can blow it up. That's how we killed the Berserker.
Oh, it's amazing. You don't have to fight the Berserker. You can just blow up the train car they're on, and they fall off.
Right. Yeah. So, but there's also a button to like detach the train cars or whatever.
Oh, we just detonated the...
Yeah, you can do that, but it's more fun to blow up that big red barrel.
It is strange, though, that you can't shoot it, for sure, because we tried that first. And then I was like, wait, I wonder if a grenade will do it, and that did.
That's funny because we tried all of that before the Berserker fight, so you might not be able to destroy it at all before the Berserker fight.
Potentially.
And then we thought we had to get the Berserker to run into the fuel tank, and then they started screaming at us, just detach the cars. So that's what I did, and it died. So,
well, so yeah, we should probably go back to Act 5. Like, pretty much the entirety of Act 5 takes place on a train, because there's a train carrying the light mass bomb now that we have, now that we have mapped out the tunnels using Marcus's dad's fancy map. We must take this big bomb into the tunnels, and it's on this train. And pretty much this whole act takes place on the train, which I thought was cool. Like, I think that's an interesting set piece for the game. It doesn't ultimately do a ton. Like, it's more just stand behind cover. But there are a couple cool moments where like enemies are on the side of the train, like flying on stuff, and you have your like requisite turret section where you get on a turret and like shoot stuff on the train. So like, I thought this was a cool like amalgamation of concepts in this last act.
The game did do a good job of amping up the difficulty by combining elements that you've seen before. So it definitely introduced enemies one at a time. So you could understand how to fight them. And then by Act 4, it's finally putting them all together with cool, like large set pieces with lots of cover for you to move around and enemies coming from different directions over time. So easily the most entertaining part of this game for me was Act 4. And by the time we got into Act 5 and we're like running down a giant hallway, which is what the train is, I was starting to get bored again.
The train is cool visually for a lot of reasons, and it's like, it's actually a lot of moments in this game I felt like they seemed kind of epic, and so I would like take a screen recording and then I would watch us play back, and I was like, why did I think what I did was cool? Like, I didn't feel cool watching it back, which, it's not going to. But like, Austin, you remember there's a couple times we threw grenades at the same time and we were like, oh, that was so cool. Like, we just took like 3 of them. Then I would go look at the clip and I was like, I can't even figure out what we did. It's just...
Yeah. I think it's a game that feels a lot better to play than it does to watch played back, for sure.
Yeah, which, it's a game, so that's fine, obviously. But...
Sure.
Taz and I definitely had the most fun getting back-to-back chainsaw kills, which is kind of a useful tactic when you're playing co-op, right? Like, you can have one of you kind of draw aggro from the guys, and the other one of you can like try and sneak up behind him. And if you get aggressive enough, like you could run up chainsaw dude. So then his buddy turns, it's like, oh no, shoot that guy. And then your buddy comes out of cover and chainsaws that one. And that felt fucking epic. But it's hard to pull off. And the chainsaw is pretty finicky.
most of the little arenas definitely, even when they're not forcing you into those flanking sections with like a turret or whatever, there's so much opportunity to flank with your partner. Even the AI sometimes, right? And so that was definitely a lot of fun when you're kind of pinned down and one person runs to the side and like distracts them, the other person can get a headshot or the chainsaw, whatever. Those moments were definitely like the most satisfying combat moments when that co-op really kind of reared its head and you truly worked with someone else to accomplish something, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really what they're trying to get you to do. So if you lean into it, it's fun. But when you start off playing the whole campaign on hardcore mode and you kind of want to beat the segment, if you play conservatively, like you kind of stick together in the same spot and just coordinate your fire on targets, that tends to work out better. When you get aggressive, there's a good chance you're going to get dropped.
And that's ultimately one of, I think, the biggest mixed bag elements of this first game, especially, is like cover is virtually invincible. Like if you're behind cover, you're pretty much safe. Like enemies won't usually run around to get to you, and if they do, it's pretty easy to move to another piece of cover where you're once again completely invincible. Like, and it works both ways, and the enemies are largely invincible too, but they'll poke their heads out a lot more frequently than you have to. Mm-hmm. So like, if you're locked behind cover, you're pretty much safe. So it does make oftentimes the best tactic just sit there behind cover and wait for the enemy to poke his stupid head out. Like,
yeah, which
except for a couple moments that Adam had mentioned about like having to flank turrets and stuff, which are really cool. But oftentimes it's like the best strategy is stand in cover and just sit there.
I did appreciate them at least making it very easy to resurrect your comrade whenever they dropped. You very much just
it's so fast. It's like instant, which is great.
You run up and hit tag, and one of the few voice lines I did genuinely laugh at was when Dom came over and rezzed me one time and straight up called me a pussy. He was just like, "Get up, pussy." And I was like, "Whoa, what the?"
Like, damn, okay.
I was not ready for that. yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not Baird. Who are you talking to? So
it is very 2006 with its little voice quips for sure.
Which I don't know. I've never heard a video game be that forward with the cursing before. Like even
that's because you never played Gears of War, man.
Oh, okay.
Gears of War is a man's game, Jeff. Come on.
Oh, man's game. I feel like there's a lot to unpack there, Austin, but we're not the podcast for that.
You can go play your Disney Valley somewhere else. So before we talk about the last boss fight, though, am I hallucinating an entire segment where you like ran away from a giant locust creature with a gun on its back, and then it ran into like power lines?
So happy you brought this up. I imagine this has to be the mission that has been inserted from like the remastered. Okay,
it is.
Okay,
I just recalled this. Yes.
Yes, I believe it is.
Which was one of the more fun parts of the game, but it's also where I totally lost the plot because it's like you.
Yeah, it's like, why is this happening?
Yeah. You guys like split up. It's chasing you from the mansion or whatever because you're in this APC that you got from the mansion after you got the map, not the star map, the map, the underground map, inverse of the star map. Yes, this segment is just totally ridiculous, and you and Dom run off on your own while Baird and Cole run off on their own, and a giant mouse rat with machine guns and like fucking cannon for a face with an orc riding it, which again felt very Warhammer 40k.
Yes, that
chases you around a bridge. So
yes, and then you have to fight it in like a big arena, and you have to like run around in circles and shoot it, and then you have to like shoot the orc guy out of it. Yeah.
You say 40k, I immediately thought of like the Tau Empire and one of those just giant creatures with like a gun on its back from Dawn of War.
Correct.
That just like stomps around. Yeah.
They ride like these dinosaur looking things or whatever, and these orcs ride a giant mouse, I guess. But yeah, 100%.
Okay, because I was looking at my summary here and I was like, that seems like something that might be mentioned, but now I think it makes sense because I was basing these off of like a review from when it first came out. So
yeah, I thought it was the end of the game. We were so confused after we murdered that thing by luring it into the power lines, right? It just felt so climactic, which is a good thing. And then we were like, wait, I'm sorry, we're still doing something else? I thought we killed the big bad. We can go home now, right?
No, we have to fight General RAAM first.
Yeah.
It definitely makes sense that was the Ultimate Edition insert for sure.
Yeah, but That makes so much sense. It gave Cole a lot of moments to shine. I guess that's also why there are just a lot more voice lines in general. This is also where I like finalized my opinion that Baird sucks. Like I've never seen a man with muscles that big be this much of a wuss. So.
I like the two as characters, but man, they were just so useless as actual like partners in combat. There was this one scene in the tunnels where it's like it's a hallway with a couple of hallways branching off, and they're all these lambent wrenches are running from the far end, and my Cole is just turned down a hallway with nothing in it, shooting at a wall. I was like, dude, what are you doing?
I know exactly the segment you're talking about. Like, I guess that's just where the AI gets tripped up because he was like, "Yeah, man, I got this direction, and there's nothing in that.
There's
direction."
nothing there.
It's like, cool, thanks for shooting that wall, Cole.
And then I think I got him
Great.
killed because I was shooting the explosive wretches as they passed him. And it's like, well, I can't do anything about that.
But then there's no less than 4 cutscenes of Cole being a badass and playing, tag with the giant rat monster. So great addition. Thank you guys for adding that in the remaster Epic or whoever did it.
I know Cole is like very much the like stereotypical like token black guy, which is like, you know, I'm sure that's hit or miss for some people, but I just really like his like charm, and I like that they basically just took like an NFL player and just was like, what if he was in a war against aliens?
Right. I think he's the
I
first.
just kind of love that. I just kind of love that about him.
He's the first like linebacker space marine, which like I am totally here for. Yeah. He is easily the best character in this game.
He definitely has the most like charisma and charm and like personality for sure.
All of them are kind of stereotypical meatheads, so I don't think it's like too much of a problem that he is also one. Like, but yeah, I just love the background of like he played, you know, space football or whatever, you know, and all these people,
thrash ball or whatever it's called,
and like some of the Stranded like recognized him in Act 2, and it's kind of
it's
cool
like, oh my god, the Cole train.
Yeah, the Stranded love Cole, and then Baird goes on to whine about it for the whole act. So
even Jesus, man. I do like that, like Dom, like whenever they first encounter Cole, like, oh my god, you're the Cole train. And they start like talking about the, like his highlight reel.
Yeah,
it's like, yeah, that's great.
It is interesting, right? Because imagine like if aliens invaded in like I don't know 2012, you gotta figure like someone's gonna run into Tom Brady on the battlefield, right?
I mean, it's possible.
Like when things get bad enough, there's no hiding for anyone anymore. Right?
Right. It's like somebody's gotta like we gotta get out there, we gotta fight. So.
I was gonna say maybe now we can talk about the final boss fight because there's really not a whole lot to talk about. I can barely even remember it. Like General RAAM's on a train and he's surrounded by the Krill, so you have to do some like Hammer of Dawn stuff to get his little Krill shield to go away first, and then you just kill him. Is that more or less?
That there's no Hammer of Dawn. That might have been interesting.
Oh.
But
You just have to like shoot the Krill whenever they fly out, and you just keep shooting RAAM and throw grenades at him, and that's it.
Yeah. We also did repeat this segment 12 times because I thought there was like tactics or like gameplay involved in this final fight, and there is not. Actually, the best tactic is sit behind the first cover and just shoot at him as he approaches you, and fling some grenades sometimes, and then you will win. If you move forward, those Krill will annihilate you. That's
like literally the note I made was just like the answer to this ends up being don't move from this one spot.
Correct.
Like, and that's insane especially because I remember playing this fight back in the day, and I just rose-colored glasses and all. I just remember this fight being so much cooler and more epic, and like, you know, a sense of big scale and climax. And I was like, whoa! And then playing it again in this one, I'm just like, this is the worst fight ever. Like, you just stand here and shoot this man over and over again.
Yeah, the rat was so much better. But yeah, we did eventually kill the Krill Keeper or whatever. Sorry.
The Krill.
Is his name General RAAM, RAAM? Does anyone know what that stands for?
No. Random access memory.
We can leave it there. No, of course not. Why would you?
No, alien access memory, obviously.
Yes, you're right. Random alien access memory.
I have to have a feeling it was just someone being like, I don't know, he rams a sniper bolt, or rams a knife through Kim's neck at one point.
Yeah.
So I guess we'll just call him that.
General RAAM.
But we give him 2 A's to make it interesting, of course.
Well, it's space, so everything has to be, you know.
That's right.
It's just like the super solid state drive in Helldivers, right?
It's so much better though. Yeah, that was my one problem with this game, is that people kept asking me to play Helldivers instead, and that was really hard to say no to.
I mean, understandable, but
so we decided So I think I already talked about this. Like we were originally going to try to play Gears 4 because we thought that would be a co-op campaign. It wasn't. The only one is Gears 3, which you can't play unless you still own a 360. So we're like, okay, we'll play the Gears 4 Horde mode. And like it's interesting enough, but it really did just make me feel like, okay, I'd rather either just play the Mass Effect 3 multiplayer or Helldivers than play this.
I also feel like we didn't entirely, we just kept dying and refused to turn down the difficulty, but that's okay too.
Yeah, but that's the thing is I'm not going to enjoy Gears on normal. I know I'm not because it's just going to be so easy like Act 1 was.
Yeah, maybe that's fair.
As someone who did play all of Act 1 on hardcore, that was definitely a good choice because it's still relatively easy, but I at least died once, so.
There was a lot of sections where it was like, it was tough but doable, and then you would just hit like, I have to die here 12 times to figure it out roadblock, which is kind of the nature of playing these types of games on hard. I mean, it's the same case when I played Wolfenstein or like a Call of Duty or even like Mass Effect on a harder difficulty, right? But yeah, it's just like, it's a weird thing, right? We were talking about this in Discord. We all enjoyed this game, and yet it's still like a hesitant recommendation in the modern era because you're telling someone to go spend like 8 to 10 hours on a campaign that, while not terrible, has just been done better so many times since then. And it's cool to see it in a kind of gaming history way. But ultimately, like, I don't know, should you waste 2 Saturday afternoons on this or not? That might be a thing I'm going to say no.
Oh, I would resoundingly say no, but
I think the hardest thing for me about this is that, at least right now, I know there's some like leaked rumor stuff about a Gears of War collection coming to like PlayStation and Xbox and PC and everything later this year, potentially. That'll package all these games together so they'll finally all be playable. But I think that's really where I hesitate. It's like, this series is worth experiencing potentially, like all the way through. But without being able to do that, it's hard to recommend just this first game because it's on its own. I think it's fine, and I look back on it favorably, and I enjoyed running through it. If you have a friend and you don't know what else to play, like you're tired of Helldivers or whatever it is, and you want something else, I could see Gears of War not being the worst way to spend your time. But without being able to play the rest of the series, it feels kind of weird because it's like, there is potential better stuff later down the line, but you can't actually get to it because it's locked behind the 360.
Which is just crazy to me that's still the only way to play those two. I can't believe it. Like,
I mean, it sounds like they're trying to fix it with this collection that is potentially coming out. So better late than never, I guess. But yeah, it's crazy that like you haven't ported this to PC yet on Game Pass. Like,
I mean, I can only imagine that happens. So I never got into the Gears franchise, right? This is my first experience with it. And it always felt like the other game that wasn't Halo or Call of Duty, right? Like those two franchises were huge at the same time that Gears of War was around. And I just didn't understand like why someone would play Gears when these other franchises were there. And that might also be reflected in why it's taking longer to get these remakes and releases out. But I don't know. Austin, do you have any impression of how big the fan base is for Gears compared to COD or even Halo?
I mean, I don't think it quite reaches those levels of COD or Halo. Definitely not Call of Duty. I mean, that game's got the most rabid fan base for some reason. The most rabid fan base that's like not very vocal, but it still buys the games in like insane amounts. But I'm definitely with you in that it feels like the other game in a lot of ways. But I do think it had a pretty hardcore fan base, and that's why like Gears 4 and 5 sold pretty well. They were received pretty favorably. I think they're going for very different experiences. I don't think it's fair to compare Halo and Gears and Call of Duty. Like, this is not a first-person shooter. It's a cover-based, like, third-person co-op military bro shooter. I don't think that's going for the same vibe that Halo is.
You're right. It is definitely very different mechanics, but it's just yet another like action shooter, right? And even like the tone is kind of aimed at like the bro-y, lowbrow, like low effort kind of content. And I'm just like, who was the audience for this game? Like, did it happen because Halo 2 was a few years old and Halo 3 didn't come out till 2007 and Call of Duty had an off year in 2006. Is that why this game took off? Or
I mean, I think it's just going for a more this is definitely a more mature is maybe not the right word, but it's definitely like
edgier. It's definitely
yes, bloodier. It's got the swearing. It's got the violence. It's got the pussy. It's got that kind of that.
The word pussy, to be fair, there's no women in this fucking game.
No. There is one woman, and she's mostly behind a screen or a voice. She's in your head 90% of the time, on comms. She's seen for about 30 seconds, and that is it.
So Austin, I had completely forgotten about this woman yesterday, and I was making fun of her for having maybe 6 voice lines in the game, or making fun of the devs for giving her 6 voice lines. And you were like, "Oh man, you got to finish the game." And then I finished the game, Austin, and she didn't have another voice line. What
Are you kidding me? She talks to you 7 times on that train.
What? She does? Was that her?
She definitely talks to you again. Yes, that's the same woman. That's Anya.
I can't. Was it?
I'll take Austin's word for it.
I don't. So what I don't remember for sure, I think in the later games, her and Marcus have a thing.
Right.
There's
of course.
There's a relationship thing there because of course there is. I don't remember that for sure. For sure, don't quote me on it. But yeah, she's the only female character throughout pretty much the entire series until the 4th game, which puts the lead character as a female.
I will say it was very funny. She's the first non-roided out human you see in the game. So it's hysterical to see her standing amongst 12 dudes who are comically undersized.
That are just absolutely massive.
Right. She is the size of your forearm, basically. But yeah, no, that was...
Yeah, this game is definitely, I think, targeted at male high school teenagers.
Sure.
16. That is 100% this game's target audience. And I think it found that audience. And I mean, I was right around, 2006. I'd have been younger than that, actually, by a lot. I'd been 11. So I wasn't playing this in 2006. But I probably did play it right around 2012 or 2013 when I started playing M-rated games, and one of them that I wanted to pick up was Gears, and it did, I think, hit. There was a certain appeal at that age range of just blood, gore, violence. I think there is an appeal to that. I think that's why it caught on more, not more, but in spite of things like Halo. At the time, it was just a different tone that it was going for, and I think it appealed to that demographic.
No, you're right.
As you can tell by the credits being 500 straight white dudes, and I'm assuming.
Oh my god,
straight.
I forgot about that. That was so funny. We sat there because we were I just want to see when the first picture of a woman shows up, and it takes 12 minutes, and there's 2 of them.
And I think both of them are marketing or something. It's oh man.
It was a different industry, man. It was.
It was. I mean, we talked a lot about that in the Play Nice episode, and definitely a different time. But yeah, it was pretty. It was pretty bad seeing the number of just white dudes.
Well, they all look the same too. It was glasses and short brown hair and a t-shirt. Every single one of them.
This definitely feels like a bunch of guys were man, what if we just made a power fantasy game where we were all super cool, dude bros, space marines.
Yeah.
And that's what this game is. And honestly, I get the appeal of it. That's not my personality in general, but I get the appeal in the moment.
No, I'm completely convinced that they made a cool cover shooter type game engine. We're testing that out, and then someone played a bit of Warhammer 40K, and we're guys, I got a story now. Wait, so last follow-up question on the female character. Do you guys think she's there just because Cortana existed at the time?
Could be. I was actually going to bring up
maybe.
I wonder how much of this game is influenced by Halo. I actually wanted to bring it up during the overpowered melee, because Halo is kind of known for having devastating melee, but it's so much more balanced around it's if they don't have a shield, it will kill them in one hit. If they do have a shield, it takes out, it's this set amount of damage that works really well in that kind of combat ecosystem. And I almost wonder if that's part of why they were no, hitting someone with a pistol should fuck them up. Right? That's that's what Halo does.
Maybe a little bit, but also just like don't get me wrong, chainsawing a dude in half is fucking awesome.
Sure.
Again, go look at the Space Marines chainsword. But I feel like they'd had to put other melee stuff in it just because of that. I don't know how much of it was driven by Halo's melee attack, but maybe. I don't know.
It's not, I was reading what Cliffy B says was like his inspirations. Halo isn't one of the listed ones, but it was so big at the time, you have to figure somehow or another it wormed its way in, right? He was mostly saying, I played this game called Kill Switch in the PS2 era, and that was like kind of the first ever cover shooter, but it was really bad, and it was back when third-person shooters had the crosshair in like the middle of the screen, and your character was in the middle of the screen, Then he played Resident Evil 4, which was really the first game to do the over-the-shoulder thing, or the first big game. And he kind of just like merged those two concepts. And he was like, wouldn't it be cool to have like the best of both of these things? And then apparently he was really into Metal Gear too, and just a lot of weird sci-fi stuff going on. But the influences were pretty obvious once I read that interview, right?
Yeah. Certainly from a gameplay perspective. I have a suspicion that some of the lore and writing is largely from other people and influenced from their preferences, as opposed to Cliff was interested in making like an Unreal shooter type game at first. It's actually go read the Wikipedia article, y'all. I think Gears of War exists in this like short and interesting moment in the industry where they talk about how games had moved away from being multiplayer and like single player cinematic games were big at the time. And I think that entirely happened because like couch co-op type things were kind of going away. Like what kind of console hardware or PC gaming you bought was changing up, and the internet was not yet ubiquitous. So this is like sort of a last moment of video games built for an industry where you couldn't assume that someone had broadband internet connections, which really takes off after like the end of that decade, and Xbox Live and all of the online gaming shooters becoming like the absolute norm now, right?
Yeah, this is like what we talked about a little bit with Play Nice and how WoW had really blown up in that bubble before. When basically like existing online with someone and just talking to them while playing the game was such a novel fucking concept. And now it's like everyone just has a Discord chat they're in while they game with their buddies in high school, right?
It was a different time. So if you're interested in what things used to be like, go play Gears of War.
I really do think this, I know y'all are both hesitant, and Adam, you're hesitant. Jeff, you're just straight up don't bother.
You can skip it. You don't have to, but you can.
I think there is some value to just seeing the original Gears of War and seeing what I still think, as far as like the series goes at least, is the best example of covered shooter based gameplay. I know that genre kind of died out after Mass Effect 3, kind of like I talked about earlier, but it still feels like the best example of it, at least from like a raw gameplay perspective. Obviously, Mass Effect is a game I would take any day, but in the like core raw cover shooter mechanics, I still think Gears is one of the best to do it, if not the very best.
There's a lot of interesting stuff reading this interview back, or this Wikipedia where it's sourcing the interview, because some of the influence he lists are obvious, right? We talked about Resident Evil 4, Kill Switch, but then he talks about how like Blazinski also cited the influence of The Legend of Zelda, including its storytelling and world-building elements, acquiring and mastering tools and underground environments. If you say so. Not one that's readily apparent.
Yeah, that feels like a stretch.
But like I said, I think, ultimately there's a lot of things influencing you might not be like aware of when you're making a game, right? It's every game you've ever played. So
Sure.
Yeah, so to kind of wrap this up, I what I said earlier, a little bit of a hesitant recommendation. I do think it's like the value in playing this would be to play all of them, and you can't do that right now. So you may as well wait. It's not like an amazing experience all on its own, but I bet it does fit in really well if you are going to play through the whole thing. And so, yeah, you may as well just wait till some unannounced date in 2025 where they're going to let you finally play the second and third one.
I would agree with that. I think playing the rest of the series would make the first game retroactively a lot better. On its own, it's an okay time. I had fun playing it with Adam, though. Like, I think we had a good time playing co-op for 2 or 3 sessions. And, if you need another game to play, if you've played all your games and you're kind of wondering what to play next, maybe try Gears. I think it holds up well enough and has some value just in its historical context as well.
Yeah, I mean, I largely agree with that. I would say if you want to hedge your bets, wait till the collection gets released, and then maybe go try Gears. But if you have a burning desire to, no one should stop you. I'm just not going to get you hyped up about it.
Fair enough.
And that about wraps up our episode on Epic Games' 2006 pioneering cover shooter, Gears of War.
You can find this episode, as well as our previous episodes, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcasting platform.
And you can find us on YouTube and Blue Sky at the Games Gone By podcast.
Signing off for Games Gone By, I'm Adam.
I'm Austin.
And I'm all aboard the coal train.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you next time.